and again. In the 2008 election cycle, Americans were promised change. A new tenor, a new day in Washington. A change we could believe in is what we were told. A year later, as we start to look at the results of this change, then it makes us wonder, what kind of change are we really getting? When you look at the federal budget, last year's budget carried a $1.4 trillion deficit. $1.4 trillion with a T. Now, most people really don't understand what a trillion is. You know, I'm sure we've got some business people, and I know we've got a banker in the room. I'm sure he understands what a trillion is. I've got a friend that's very good with numbers. So we were talking about what a trillion really was. And he did a calculation. He said if you take a $100 bill, it's 6.14 inches long and 0.0043 inches thick. If you were to lay a trillion $100 bills end to end, they would wrap around the earth at the equator 122 times. Now, if you were to stack 1 trillion $100 bills up, just on top of each other, they would reach a height higher than the International Space Station. The International Space Station hovers around the Earth at 200 miles above the Earth. This stack of 1 trillion $100 bills would reach 680 miles high above the Earth. So that's the federal budget deficit for last year. Last year, 1 year that they spent into the red. Now our current debt is more than $12 trillion. So it's 12 times that. I mean, how far are we going to go, people? Are we going to stack those $100 bills up all the way to the moon before we stop this madness? I tell you, I think that we got a change in Washington, but I don't think it's a change that we can afford. Now, when you look at this stimulus bill that they passed recently, the economy was in the rut. I think we'd all agree that the Congress needed to do something. But what they did is they put a rush job together. Now, you know, my grandfather used to always say, he taught me a very valuable lesson when I was a kid. He had this little grocery store, this little country store. And, my job at 6 years old was to sweep and mop the floor. And I had to do this before I could go play or read my comics. So one day I decided, you know what? I can come up with a more efficient way to do this. Grandpa thinks he knows best, but I know better. So instead of sweeping the floor first, I just mopped it. I just skipped that whole sweeping thing. So I ended up with these big clods of dirt that I picked up and tried to sweep under bookshelves and inventory cases and other things. So my grandfather comes in and he says, son, and he used some colorful language that I won't use in front of gentlemen ladies, but the bottom line was that I didn't do it right and I had to do it again. And I said, but Grandpa, you know, it's done. He said, but you didn't do it right. And he said, I'm going to make you do it over and over again until you do it right. So I took my time, and it took an hour, and I swept the thing up, and I mopped it, and he came and he said, yeah, that's right, that's right. Now he said, now the lesson here is, if you had done it right the first time and took the time, you wouldn't have done it again. Well, somebody needs to teach that lesson to the United States Congress, because they passed a $780 billion stimulus bill by telling American citizens that they were going to save or create 3 million jobs. Now, I've spent time in government. I went to this little school called Harding and got my Master's of Business Administration. I spent 2.5 years as an advisor to small businesses, so I know a little bit about jobs. Now, I know how you create a job and how you can quantify that and validate it. I don't know how you save a job and prove that you did that. You know, I mean, I guess I could come over to your bank and say, oh, you got these jobs? Yeah, I saved those jobs with my stimulus. I just don't get how you quantify that. But anyway, the president, the administration says that they saved 1 million jobs at the end of the day with the stimulus. A third of what their goal was. They saved or created 1 million jobs. Well, you know, again, not a mathematician or an economist, but I do have a few degrees. And if you divide 1 million by 780 billion, that's $787,000 per job. Now, when the Congress first proposed this measure, we in the small business community said, business can do it better. We can do it faster. We can do it for less. Give us tax credits to incent and motivate business, especially small business, to take risks and hire people. Give us $10,000 per job. Give us $10,000 per year for 3 years for each job we create at a certain minimum income level. And the Congress said no, government can do it better. And they ended up spending $787,000 per job. I tell you, my friends, we got a change we cannot afford. That's what we have in Washington. And now the conversation has moved on to health care. I know that you've all been reading a lot about health care. You're probably sick and tired of hearing about health care, and there's some of you wishing that I, instead of coming late, just not showing up so you don't have to hear any more about health care. Well, I got to tell you, we just got to talk a little bit about health care, because while the results of the election in Massachusetts may give some of us pause, some sense of relief that maybe this thing isn't going to happen, it's not over yet. It's not over yet. Something has to be done with health care. And I don't want you all to think that it's my position or the NFIB's position that nothing needs to happen, that everything's fine and dandy, because it's not. Over the past decade, small business owners have seen their health care premiums go up more than 100%. So understand, we know that there's a problem. We pay more for less than large corporations do. Each and every day. Each and every day. We understand there needs to be a change. But this bill that's pending in Congress right now doesn't do anything to address the main issues. Let's talk about it a little bit. The bill would cost the American taxpayer $87 million per year, nearly $1 trillion over the first decade. It would require small business to offer health insurance to their employees whether they can afford it or not. It would require the American people, for the first time in history, the United States government would require Americans to buy something. And when it comes to health care, it's something that we cannot afford. I mean, think about that for a moment. This bill contains an individual mandate. Everyone has to buy it, whether you want it, whether you can afford it or not. Now, I know people who feel that they can manage their own care. You know, they're people of some wealth, and they decide, look, I'll just pay for it out of pocket. They ought to be able to make their choice. I have a younger brother who is on the far end of the economic strap. He has 3 kids. He makes about $8 an hour in Atlanta. He works really hard to support his kids. He thinks he can't afford it, and he just tries to do the things he needs to do to stay healthy. He ought to be able to make that choice. The United States Congress, in the land of what's supposed to be the free, should not have the authority to come in and tell people to buy what they cannot afford. Now, the Congress's answer to that is, if you can't afford it, we're going to give you a subsidy. And the rest of the people are going to pay for it. Now, I've got several problems with that. Problem number one, I think the biggest problem that we have in this country is all these entitlement programs, all these things we give to people just because we think they need them or want them. And then we expect everyone else to pay for them. But problem number two is the average net worth of a U.S. senator is $8.9 million, according to Forbes. I don't know about you, but I don't want a guy who's worth $8.9 million telling me what's affordable. Do you?